If you've been around for a while, then you know how much I care about financial freedom for all. One thing that often gets in the way of that is debt. That's why I'm happy to announce that I've partnered with an amazing organization called Juno. Juno helps you get lower interest rates by using the power of group negotiation. It is a completely free resource that you can use to secure lower interest rates on new and existing student loans. Head to the link in the episode show notes to find out more.
This is the Dreamers Podcast, episode 23, with financial educator, author, and speaker Marcus Garrett. Today is June 22nd, 2021.
The time's going to pass anyway. I got 25, 30, 50 years to figure it out. Why not strive for greatness? Why not make the sky the floor instead of the sky the ceiling?
Hello, world. Welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I am Stephanie Anne-Lyse, also known as Anne-Lyse Wealth. I am a financial coach and an author. I self-published my first book, Dream of Legacy, a guide to help dreamers reach financial independence and build generational wealth. In this podcast, I'll have conversations with experts and thought leaders who dare to follow their dreams. You'll hear about their journey and their money stories. I hope it inspires you, dreamers out there, to live life on your own terms.
Come on, dreamers, let's change the world!
This episode is brought to you by Dream of Legacy. Check out dreamoflegacy.com for resources to assist you on your journey to financial independence.
Hello, welcome back to the Dreamers Podcast. I'm your host, Anne-Lyse Wealth, and I'm so glad you're here today. My guest on the podcast today is author, speaker, and entrepreneur Marcus Garrett. Marcus Garrett is a certified internal auditor and financial data analyst by day and a financial educator by night. He is a speaker, entrepreneur, and the author of Debt Free or Die Trying: How I Buried Myself $30,000 in Debt and Dug My Way Out. I had a great conversation with Marcus. We talked about how he was $30,000 in debt by age 27 and created a plan to get out of it by age 30. Soon after graduating college, he started freelance writing. He was one of the early young Black male voices in the personal finance space. He co-founded Paychecks and Balances and has now moved on to build his own brand, the Marcus Garrett. We discussed all of that as well as his advice on how to tackle debt and how he increased his salary by 400% in 4 years. He recently got engaged, so we also talk about how to approach finances before getting married and so much more. Here is Marcus Garrett. Marcus Garrett, welcome to the Dreamers Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your story and what you do with our listeners?
Auditor by day job, been in the field of audit for 15 years now. I'd like to say it flew by, but I actually think it dragged by. But most people know me as far as personal finance goes. I wrote a book in 2016, as we were talking pre-show, called Debt Free or Die Trying: How I Buried Myself $30,000 in Debt and Dug My Way Out. And that one was by age 30. A few years later, worked with an editor, wrote a second edition, kind of refined the calls to action, reorganized it, added a few chapters going into like credit score and budget management, talked a little bit about increasing my salary as well. I think we're going to talk about that later in the show. Re-released that in 2020, just slightly modified the title. So now it's Debt Free. It's an acronym. So define the problem, establish a plan, build a budget, and trust the process. So it's a 4-step actionable book now. I'm a 3 times Amazon Kindle best-selling author.
So what motivated you to write the book?
Well, I started off as a freelance writer slash blogger. Again, going flashback in time, I think I actually started coming out of school. It depends on like what you qualify as freelance writing, which is actually professional and paid. No offense to the bloggers out there, versus the personal blog, which you started up on a WordPress, which I did. And so I started that like coming out of to date myself, coming out of MySpace. I don't even think remember this, but MySpace had like a blogging feature, and I would just like write about my various 20-something adventures, and people were like, "This is you need to do a blog." I was like, "What the hell's a blog?" And so I figured it out, launched a blog. And that was kind of the starting point, and ended up working with 7 other writers, a team of writers eventually. And as I was going through that journey, now in my later 20s, my life is not as exciting. So therefore, I don't have as much to write about. Was getting out of debt. Got into the majority of my debt around age 26. I had about 27,000, I believe, at that time. And I just started telling that story. And as I did so, that began to resonate with people because, people in their later 20s start to think about money. And they're like, once again, I'm just motivated by the audience. They're like, you should write a book. I'm like, how do you write a book? And so, I had to figure that process out. I published through Amazon, as I talked about earlier. I have a paperback as well, but I published through Amazon Kindle. And as my brother-in-law describes my life, I kind of just Forrest Gump my way through life. There's really not some grand plan or scheme here, just from one step or journey to the next. And that led to what became a best-selling book after I finally started taking it serious.
So you mentioned that you were $27,000 in debt.
So there's a quick version and a long version. Quick version is I graduated school at age 22, ironically in a degree in business. And I say that ironically because I didn't learn anything about running a business until I actually ran my second. It pretty much crashed my first. So it took me 2 failed businesses to figure out how to run a business, even though I went to school for business. Came out with about $9,000 in debt across 3 credit cards. Manageable, not too bad for a college student. And I got a consolidation loan. I had a small school loan for about $3,000. A lot of my school was paid for through a Texas scholarship fund that was available. So I went to a public school, and fortunately about, 93% of it, if you will, was covered. Sorry, folks, I am an auditor, so I like to be precise. And then, I got what I didn't know at the time was like a debt consolidation loan, which everybody knows about now, but I'm 22 years old. I thought it was free money. And they're like, 1 low monthly payment, just, fill out this form, boom, boom, bang, we got you. And they sent me a check. So to put this in context, $9,000 in debt, 3 credit cards. I got at age 18 for like a yo-yo and a t-shirt. I never had a job making more than $9 an hour. And they sent me a $10,000 check, which might as well have been blank as far as I was concerned. And I was like, yeah, we shopping. And so I ended up flipping that $10,000 debt plus the debt I already had into $26,000 in debt. Bought a car with rims. So that's the short version. I'll pause there. We can go as in-depth or un-depth as you would like.
How did you get out of debt, and what made you want to get out of debt?
Well, I wasn't done yet. So, I'm 22 now, so I'm closing in on 40. Sometimes I'm just fascinated by the mindset of what either 22-year-olds have. I don't know what they're in right now, or at least the 22-year-old mindset that I had. Because it was just like, it's only $30,000. Like, it's a little pocket change. I went to college, I'm going to be flipping 6 figures next year on the P. Diddy yacht, white party. I was just kind of in denial. So I spent another 3 years in denial, bought a flat screen TV to add to my debt for $3,000. Every time I tell this story, everybody believes every part except the $3,000 flat screen TV. So that's what it took. I had to get to $30,000 in debt. Now I'm about 27 years old. Denial is fascinating because I was working 3 jobs to make the minimum payment on this debt. But I was like, still in my head, I'm just 1 paycheck away from the P. Diddy white party. Then I missed 1 credit card payment and my interest rate shot up to 29.99%. I remember because I was so in shock when I saw it. I was like, this is outrageous. This is illegal. And, whatever it was, like I wasn't going to be able to afford it. And I just remembered that previous consolidation loan. But thing about credit, I think as the quote goes, banks lend you credit like they lend umbrellas, like when it's not raining. So when the storm comes, like they start retrenching, they start asking back for their umbrellas. And so they started asking back for their money. And I was like, 29.9% interest rate, which I'm pretty sure is illegal. I can't afford a lawyer to prove it. Joking about it now, 15 years removed, but this was like knees to ground, hands to heaven. I'm already working 3 jobs. I did not know what was next. Realizing now bankruptcy was probably going to be the answer. But, I'm 27. I really didn't know what to do. Sometime around that time, I can't remember this far back, but another consolidation loan offer did arrive. The difference this time was this literally was my last ditch effort. This was my last offer. I had no backup plan. And I called, and I remember now they were just asking basic questions. What's your total income? What's your credit score? And I just remember when he put me on hold, probably laughed with his coworkers. He said he's going to go check with management. He's probably laughing at me. I had no other answer if he didn't say yes. And so after that experience, he did say yes. I can't even remember the interest rate, but I promise you they hit me over the head. I don't remember what it was. It was probably like 28.7 or something like it went down, but I'm sure it did not go down enough. But I said to myself that I would never put myself in that position again. And I did not realize it, but that lived experience would become the story that I would ultimately tell in Debt Free or Die Trying.
What was your income like when you were $30,000 in debt?
I don't recall the exact breakdown. So I was working 3 jobs, and I think my salary job was around 50 this time. This was my second or third job out of college. So I think my salary job was around 50,000. I was doing contract work. I apologize on every podcast I go to because I used to put computers together for contract work, and I hated it. So I was throwing these computers every which way. I know people have refurbished computers all over the great United States because I was like, $15 an hour. I was giving these computers to work. I'm young, so I didn't realize that there was other people who needed these computers to survive. And so I apologize if your computer did not work between the years of 2005 to roughly 2009. That might have been my fault. And then I worked at a hotel chain nights and weekends to really just make ends meet. And then off and on, I would do contract work selling AT&T phones. And like all these things paid good. That is also the beauty of youth. That I can't even imagine a world where I work more than 40 hours. Like right now, like I get to about 41. I'm like the exhausted SpongeBob meme. I got my hands on my knees. I'm like, whoo, so I don't know how I did it. During that time, I remember talking to my ex. Now, she was biased as well. She was, I don't even know how we got on the conversation. I was like, yeah, I think I pulled in about 70 this year. And so she called me a liar. So I seem to remember it being around 70.
If you've been around for a while, then you know how much I care about financial freedom for all. One thing that often gets in the way of that is debt. That's why I'm happy to announce that I've partnered with an amazing organization called Juno. Juno helps you get lower interest rates by using the power of group negotiation. It is a completely free resource that you can use to secure lower interest rates on new and existing student loans. Head to the link in the episode show notes to find out more. Sunday, Skincare Day, is one of the ways I keep my sanity in these crazy times. Jumino is an all-natural, Black-owned skincare brand carefully handcrafted by parents who could not find the proper care solutions to address their family skin problems. All Jumino products are made of organic and high-quality ingredients, meticulously chosen to give your skin the smooth results and the glow it deserves.
So it looks like you got that last chance and you were able to get your loan consolidated again. But how did you go about, just getting better with money?
A lot of what I recommended back then is still applicable today. To date myself, I'm pretty sure Google wasn't around because I went to Yahoo. I was like, Yahoo, how do you get out of debt? And what came up was bankrate.com, which is a still very dominant brand today. And there's new ones, NerdWallet and Credit Karma. I try to stay relevant young for the kids. So it doesn't really matter, but Bankrate is still a great one. If you go to bankrate.com/calculators with an S, they have what I would call a smorgasbord, a plethora, a word that I don't get to use as much as I would like, a plethora of calculators that you can use. And, I'm so old, I went to their calculators and I plugged in, the debts that I have. And they have one that you can break down by credit card, student loans. I had a car loan at that time for that car with rims that I was still paying off. And it literally spit out a PDF. It was like, this is how much money you need to pay each month. And I still emphasize that to people, even in the book today, and even when I speak today, because a lot of people just like me, they kind of just have a lofty plan. Like my plan was to get out of debt at 25. I graduated at 22 because 25 sounded old to me. So I was like, I got to get out of debt by 25. I'll be elderly, so I can't have this debt on my shoulders. And that failed because I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a system. I didn't know how much to pay each month. So I tell people, I'm real big on systems now, which I get from my audit profession. What system are you going to put in place to move you from that goal? So to give people some context, I think it's like, by February, 90% of people fail at their New Year's resolution every year. So we're really good at making goals, resolutions, plans, debt diets. But really, I'm like a lifestyle change is what you need. And for me, it's very important to have a system in place. So yes, it was bankrate.com, and bankrate.com, unlike Yahoo, is still a number one player out there. I still recommend them.
Did you reduce your expenses? Did you increase your income? Did you do a little bit of both? Because that's 29% or 28.9% interest rate. You have to work extra hard to get that paid off.
That's an excellent question. And I did both. So at that time, so late 20s, I focused on cutting everything off. And in fact, I was so mad at that credit card company, I cut them off, which in hindsight was stupid. I actually quickly learned that was stupid because that lowered my credit score, lowered my credit utilization. I was like, I'm going to teach this billion-dollar organization of money a lesson by closing my credit card. And I only ooze-grade myself. So don't do that, calmly collect yourself and come up with your plan. And then, yeah, you're right. Even at 27, I had the wisdom, or perhaps my ACLs were going out, whatever it was, I had the foresight to realize that working 3 jobs was unsustainable, at least for me. And so I started looking for how I could make more money, ideally through one job. And because of, and I talk a little bit about this as well in my organization now, I stumbled into it, but I had a high growth career and a high income opportunity career. So the salary and career pathway for the job, which was audit, that I happened to do, really there's no ceiling to audit. You can audit I'm sure there's 100-year-old auditors out there because it's just one of those professions you can do forever. So I started looking out there for high paying audit jobs. And I actually read something about this recently. It was talking about how to adapt to graduating into a recession, like a lot of, I'll just say, younger adults are now. And one of the things was be open to moving. I've moved 3 or 4 times for different job opportunities. And I got a job opportunity that and not only replaced those 3 jobs, it increased my 9 to 5 salary, I believe 40% or something to that effect. And then when I got there, I was not going to, squander that opportunity. First of all, I was moving to a new city. I actually moved to a new state. It was Denver. And so when I moved to Denver, I was like, I don't know nobody. Don't nobody know me. I'm going to work, home, and paying these bills off. So I took that little Bankrate PDF. I think I might put it on the fridge or something like that. It then became my vision board. And I was like, we are getting out of debt. And that's why I say it was debt free or die trying, not debt free until inconvenient, not debt free until I don't want to do this no more. Because there were several, I'd say, weekends, months, and days where I did not want to do it. And I'm like, we are getting out of debt, as in me, myself, and I are getting out of debt. And so, yes, I was fortunate, but I took calculated risk to increase my salary. And then I also decreased my income. And that gap is where a lot of people can, whether you're going to snowball or avalanche, which are just 2 popular terms for paying off debt, whatever you're going to do, that is one of the, the secret sauce to doing so.
So I read that at some point you increased your salary by 400% in 4 years. How did you do that?
Well, let's take the baseline. So I don't have this math in front of me, but that interview, I can get it to you if you want to drop it in the show notes. It's on Yahoo Finance. I actually think if you type in Marcus 400%, it'll pop up. But with that being said, it ended up on the homepage, which is another haphazard story of my Forrest Gump life that I ended up at Yahoo Studios to do that interview. And so let's say I take the 50,000 just as a baseline. When I moved to Denver, I negotiated my salary. Now, mind you, and now this is something else I teach. When I say negotiate my salary, I don't mean I I researched on Yahoo because Google wasn't around, or I did any type of analysis. I was just like, I need more money, so I'm going to ask for more money. And I'm like, I'm not going to Denver for anything less than this number that I had in my head. And so it's funny. I got this number from a movie I'd watched. It was Soul Food. So if you ever seen Soul Food, I actually learned like in my 30s that I misheard the scene, but in the scene, I forget the characters. It's Mekhi Phifer. So the protagonist in this particular case, he was like antagonizing Mekhi Phifer, and he was like, I make $70,000 a year. And, I saw that at like 14, and I thought that was so cool. I was like, man, he must be rich. 70,000 must be rich, because why would he say it like that? And so I negotiated my salary, and they were like, what are your salary expectations? I was like, 70,000, just like I heard in Soul Food. If you are intimately familiar with this movie, he actually says 80,000. So they said yes. They said yes really quick. I've spent my entire life wondering if I lost out on $10,000. I'll never know. I'll never know. Then again, saw several opportunities. I got several certifications. I have 3 certifications now. So it's just always being open to opportunities to advance myself and to move up a career. And if it's not the career that allow you to move up, to find horizontal or vertical moves that allow you to do so. And I don't know if that gets me to 400%, but that's basically the pattern that I use. I always now negotiate my salary. I actually do research now. I talk about 7 tools that I use on my website. And I always negotiate. I stay informed, and I'm always open to opportunities, even if those opportunities are not defined by the boundaries of my state. I don't let where I am currently bound me into where I have to stay. So I think I said, a meme somewhere. It's like, don't let where you start define where you finish.
So it seems that it's essentially doing your research and being open.
Yeah, I want to be fair. I was fortunate, calculated, but fortunate that I was in a job field where I can negotiate 400% on top of my salary. Not everybody will have that opportunity. But to that point, I would say you need to know, does that opportunity even exist for you? And I think now there's so many, apps. I don't have them memorized. I'm old, so the one I use is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I went to the government website, and they have an occupational handbook. And I was like, dear Yahoo, I might have used Google at this point. I was like, Google, like, what is a high-paying career? And they're like, auditors and accountants. I was like, I'm an auditor. And I looked at it. It has your salary table. It has median. It has income. But there's like salary guides out there. There's even a salary wizard. One that I like to use and recommend is free from CNN Money. They have a cost of living negotiating calculator. So you'll have to Google it. But it's somewhere on CNN Money, it'll tell you, like, if I was to move from Austin, Texas, which is where I was, to Denver, how much additional I need to negotiate for my salary to also adjust for the cost of living, because Denver is more expensive than Austin. So I would bank that into also the cost of living adjustment plus the salary raise I want. And I've done this now that I've been on the hiring side. I've seen people what I would describe as body themselves. So they're going to come from like, no offense to Missouri. They're like, oh, I make 40,000 in Missouri. I'll just ask for 45 in Denver. 40,000 in Missouri don't stretch like 45,000 in Denver. So you should be, I'm just going to guess here, asking for 65 plus whatever your natural raise would be. And a lot of people just don't think like that. They're like, oh, it costs this much here. It costs this much everywhere.
Funny you mentioned that. A few years ago, I was offered an opportunity to work in California, and I live in Atlanta. It was like an 80% salary increase, and I got excited. And then I went online and realized I needed about 140%. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll stay in Atlanta.
That's a great story, because the recruiters know this. So they'll try to get you. They're like, look, man, 50% increase. And you're like, oh man, I'm balling out. But then you get out there and there's 150% more to live out there. You're like, oh, well, I lost 100% of my income with this move.
So you're the co-founder of a very popular platform, Paychecks and Balances. What inspired you to start the platform?
Yeah, so I've turned over Paychecks and Balances to Rich Jones now, who's continued it and maintains the podcast. But we did start it to help millennials make money, save money, and get out of debt. And it was actually a very simple inspiration. Rich was actually one of the gentlemen that I worked with on that writing team. He was one of the 7 writers. And we looked out there as we got older. So as as I say, my hairline receded, my waistline expanded, I was like, I don't see a lot of individuals out there talking about money that look like me, which was some of the inspiration that we have for when we started the writing. We started writing because men at that time, there's honestly too many of them now, but men that looked like us weren't writing in this niche or this topic. And so as we started getting interested in adulting, if you will, adult millennials, senior millennials, as a fan allegedly called us one day, I think I'm still offended by, is, we didn't see men that looked like us talking about, men and women that looked like us talking about personal finances and money management. Now, mind you, because some people are like, y'all are everywhere now. I'm actually tired of seeing y'all. I got 10 ads today. We started that in, I want to say 2015, 16. So the landscape looked different at that time. I'm actually very happy with how the landscape looks now, as part of the reason why I've kind of made a pivot, because I'm interested in other topics. So, I mean, as y'all kind of see, I'm a Forrest Gump my way into the next thing. And I'm just kind of pivoting into something that I think is equally important, but is a mentor. And mentors are important. I've been fortunate. I've had a lot of networks, a lot of mentors, but a mentor said to me once to use your 20s to learn, your 30s to apply, your 40s to teach and mentor. So, and pay it forward. So he was like in his 40s or 50s at that time. And now as I get there, I'm kind of seeing myself transition into this giving back phase. So all of these mistakes and lessons learned, now I can compile them. I can drop all the stupid stuff I did and I look like a genius. They're like, man, he just knows everything. You can hide, to the degree that it's not available on the internet, all the dumb mistakes you made. So that's kind of that was the genesis for where we started. And that's where I see myself now.
So is that kind of like why you decided to venture out on your own?
Well, yeah, it was a combination of the pandemic was a real wake-up call for me, and what did I want my legacy to be? So it was age/pandemic. Coincidentally, the intersection of my age and the pandemic, someone described it recently as we all went in it together, but we're going to come out at different timelines. So we all had different impacts. It had different it changed all of our lives in different ways. So we're going to come out it. And I came out of the pandemic completely different. The way I approach life, the way I think, the way I value and spend my time. And, when we were in that scary period in the beginning, I just started thinking like, what am I going to leave behind here? What difference, small or big, will I have made in this world or life? And so when I started thinking about that in totality, I was like, and I've been mulling over the idea for years before that. I was like, well, let me start my own brand. Let me start my own business. I've done all these other things working for other people, and let me see what I can do. Let me see if I can walk the talk. I've talked all this game all these years about personal finance, money management, and wealth. Let me see if I can do it for myself. And so that was kind of my aha moment. And like, let me see if I put my head down and put full time into this, what that could look like. And ultimately, the Marcus Garrett, the brand, was born out of that.
The pandemic has definitely been a wake-up call for a lot of people.
I've shared on a few other casts, in addition to the pandemic, although they happen around the same time, 2 wake-up calls for me, or aha moments for me, is, you think you're invincible until you're proven otherwise. And we were actually about to record the podcast. I think it was a Sunday, because we typically record on Sundays. And we got the news, as everybody else did, that Kobe's helicopter had went down. And so like we took a break. I took a walk. And even that walk was weird because I got harassed on the walk. So I was out as an African-American male existing in sweaties. So sweats, I should say. And I'm over here thinking about Kobe, and one of my neighbors was messing me like, do you live around here? I was like, I don't need this right now. But, so anyway, I continued on my walk, had basically 2 wake-up calls right there, just in an emotional state. Come back. All right, clear our heads, clear our throats. Let's get ready for this podcast. And then we got the news that his daughter was in the helicopter as well. And it's like, we're not recording today. Like I think we released another, we're just not recording today. It's just not going to happen. And so that was pre-pandemic. And I already had that, Kobe, I think was 41. I mean, another thing that I think gets overlooked is 6 or 7 other, I think it's 8 total other families were lost during that tragedy as well. A lot of people talk about Kobe, but there was 8 families in total on that helicopter, and all the individuals that were impacted because of that. And so I'm like, it just kind of got the wheel to spinning, even if subconsciously in the background, like, what am I doing here? And beyond that, I don't have forever here. And it could be 30 more years, but I don't want to take tomorrow for granted. Then the pandemic happened. So I already got that in my head. And then the other one was Chadwick Boseman, which Black Panther, for those who don't immediately recognize the name. And that came so, because he didn't talk about his cancer publicly, that came so suddenly and unexpectedly, similar to Kobe. And I think he was 43, if I remember correctly. So I've got two men, and some people are like, they're celebrities, you're not connected to them, but they're two African-American males that I came up with, whether you like it or not, and that were clear indications and are less than 5 years from my age, like during the pandemic. So I just survived this lockdown, just technically survived COVID. Like I said, I'm not saying I'm unique, but I came out of the pandemic changed. Like I couldn't go back to the old ways that I conducted myself, carried myself, and it informed how I act, how I speak, and what I do with my time.
So now you are a speaker, you're a financial educator, you're an author, and I think you're doing all of this as a side hustle, right?
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for anyone who, thinks that you can't have a full-time job and have a successful business? How are you able to do both?
I would say to people is not to underestimate yourself. And I get this all from my father, gift or curse. I get from my father the absence of borders and boundaries. I look back now, like the stuff I would say to my dad, I was like, Dad, I'm going to write a book. I'm talking about as a kid. I'm like, one day I'm going to write a book. He's like, I bet you are. I would always just come to him with what at the time I now realize were entrepreneurial pursuits and ideas. And he was just like, yeah, I can see that for you. How can I help you and support you? And so I get that from my father. And then, he's like, I guess, the dreamer of the relationship. My father describes it as, relationships are dreamers and architects. And, an architect or a dreamer's fantasy is an architect's nightmare because somebody's got to dream it up and the architect got to put it together. So, he's the dreamer. So I guess in that scenario, my mom's the architect. But what I get from my mom is like the stubbornness of the pursuit. So that's I'm going to write a book, debt free or die trying. I'm going to get out of debt or I'm going to die trying. Like I am going, like once I declare it, I am going to do this thing. And I wish hell or high water would try to stop me. And so I've got the worst or the best of the worst worlds. I'm not really sure what it is from both of these individuals. But whether that describes you or not, what I would tell people is please don't underestimate yourself. The time is going to pass regardless. That's definitely something that I've learned. It's just a matter of what you're going to do with it. Yeah. So 10 years is going to pass, 5 years is going to pass. Actually, let me put it this way, because it's better than how I'm putting it. I was actually speaking at an event, and this gentleman, his wife is now my lawyer. This was 3 years ago when it happened. And, he's listening to me tell my little Forrest Gump stories. And at the end, he came up to me. He's like, the key to overnight success is the first 10 years. And I have been repeating that. I've been taking credit for it. Every now and then I mention that he said it, but like, he's right. Like all the things that have come to fruition and where I am now and that list that you just gave and the 400% increase in the book and the number, like all of those things happen from the 10-year starts, 10 year before. Now, the only difference is I benefit from all the lessons and knowledge learned. So, for example, when you said, and people have asked, like, you're starting a whole new brand, a whole new company, you're going to pivot. That's insane. That's scary. That's intimidating. And it is. But the two strengths that I have is I've seen myself succeed. I know what failure looks like. And I'm not starting over. I'm starting from everything I already know. And it just gave me a lot of comfort. Like, I tweeted this recently. I was like, I don't know if life bends towards the benefit for me because I generally have a positive outlook, or do I have a positive outlook because life, it's chicken or egg, because life bends positive for me. Like I could have gone to Denver, fell off a mountain, but I was like, look, I'm gonna go out. I never lived in Denver a day in my life. I was just like, this is an opportunity. I'm going to take it. It was actually a 6-month probation. So they could have let me off 6 months, no pay, and said, good luck, go back to Texas. My parents have asked me about that over the years, and they just didn't know that they were my backup plan. So I'll end with this, answer that question with this. And I actually got it from my father. I used to always come to him with all these crazy ideas. So for example, because it's still out there, I used to sell knives door to door. I got hooked into that Velcro, Cutco. Somebody will know it out there. Yeah. They still get their claws in us. In us. We know who us is. I think they got their claws in my nephew. He's like 23. He's like, yeah, uncle, I'm thinking about selling knives. I'm like, they're still out there. Let me be very clear so they don't sue me. I think my parents still have those knives because my parents were my only customer. So there's some quality still. So I say all that to say I brought my knife set home, explained to my dad how I was going to put the knife game on his ear. And he was just like, what's plan B? And so the takeaway from that is just, just don't put all your eggs in plan A. Every risk that I take is calculated. And I usually have a plan through Z now, just from all the things that I've learned. So, at least dream all you want, be a dreamer, but just what's plan B?
So you recently got engaged?
I did. I got engaged recently.
Congratulations on getting engaged.
I appreciate it. It was around Valentine's Day, but I am engaged, and so we are moving on to forever in the middle of a pandemic.
So how are you and your fiance preparing for your financial life together?
Well, that's actually been a fascinating journey, and it came to a head like many relationships, I'm sure, during the pandemic. So when we entered lockdown, which I'm sure was a nightmare for her, I ain't have nothing to do. So the guy who always needs to have his hands in something didn't have anything to do. I started looking at our budget, and I was like, it seems like we spend a lot of money on food and general activity, enjoying life. We're going to have to cut that out. And I think she raised an eyebrow at the time. She gave me like a raised arch eyebrow. We were still dating at this time. So I think she kind of bit her tongue. And then, so I put a whole financial plan together, and I had it all mapped out. I had the next 25 years planned, just like I did for my life. And at some point, she let me, just like my dad, she was like, all right, you do what you do. It seems to be keeping you occupied. We can't go anywhere. After several, let's call them tense debates, I was like, sometimes I feel like I'm an artificial intelligence. I'm like, the logic is not flawed. The logic is undeniable. So she was like, look, I make my own money. I'll ask you for money. You might as well slide that. It was a Google Doc. She's like, you might as well slide that little Google Doc to recycle bin, and it's funny because I wrote a story about the experience shortly thereafter. And I really had like two takeaways. I realized, I guess I don't have to appease them anymore because, if an ex hears this, I'll hear this about this as well. But I'd never really been with an equal, like someone who also had equal financial footing, who had also thought about finances. She had her own 401k and had her own life plan and goals and schedule. And it was a real wake up call that not everybody wants to live in financial squalor and sacrifice. Like, I was living on like 50% of my income, but I lived in like a what I would call something a step above a hostel, But I'm like, I got all this money in the bank, I'm good. I just gotta, come home before the street lights come on and I'm good, somebody will hop on my head. And she's like, yeah, I'm gonna upgrade you a little bit. And so she has introduced me to the finer things in life, allowed me to live on my income in ways that I never would have. So the answer is like, we were able to find a financial plan that worked for both of us. You got to have the discussion. And I'll be perfectly honest, you got to have the fights too. Like that's the people try to avoid the fights, but financial and infidelity, and I think financial is number one, is the top cause of divorce. So you so busy trying to avoid an uncomfortable 15-minute conversation that ultimately lends to the end of the relationship. And so we set up a financial plan individually that worked for the both of us. And pretty much the takeaway was, I was like, well, my comfort would be if you work with a financial planner. It clearly cannot be me. We about to be at each other's throat. But, if you do that, I'm good. Like, I just want to know that you are doing something. She's like, okay, cool. And then, we, as far as the wedding, that was the primer because of the earlier conversation allowed us to have a more peaceful wedding conversation. It was just like, what's the wedding budget? I said a number. It wasn't high enough. And she was like, okay, I'm going to raise it this much more. But she's like, I'll fund what I'm interested in. And I was like, cool. And I was like, if there's anything that I'm interested in. So, guys, I might want to fly or tux, I don't know, North Carolina blue or something like that. I might want to pull up in the Rari. I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. Like, but that's on me. Like, she's not going to go half with me on the Rari. But like things that we both mutually benefit from, cater and stuff like that, we just go half on. Like, you got to have the difficult conversations in order to have the easy conversations.
Yeah, it seems that when you are the personal finance person in your relationship, it's easy to just take over. So just finding common ground is definitely a great thing to do.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. Like, everyone had just deferred to me in the past. Like, oh, you got a book, you got finance, you got a job, figure it out. And she was like, no, I'm good.
So I'd like to end the interview with a round of rapid fire questions. Tell me about a book that changed your perspective on life.
I'm a cheat. And I'm gonna go with two. The Millionaire Next Door was actually given to me by my father in high school. So it'll always have a sentimental place to me. And it's still a great book. I reread it again in my 30s. It's still a great book. But as far as like most people, I realize they're not a money nerd. Like apparently I am. I've read like 20 books at this point as far as finances go. And I did a review of all of them. It's freely available at themarcusgarrett.com. And the one I recommend, people are like, give me one book. And I read it this year because it was coincidentally recommended to me. It's The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. That book, in my opinion, if you were going to read one, would give you everything that you need. It goes through the basics, the fundamentals, the foundation, and the explanation behind why, because a lot of people need to understand the emotional why behind it. So I would say this Simple Path to Wealth.
I think the Millionaire Next Door is really like about the mindset, and then the Simple Path to Wealth gives you like actionable items.
Right. I like and like I said, in my book, it has calls to action. It literally tells you where to put your money, the name of the account, how much to put there. And like, I realize now over the years that that's what people need, is like that stair step, like go left, go right. You're going to see a dog down there. Don't pet that dog. It'll bite you. And then, that's where you're going to put your money. And so that it's a great book for that.
Tell me about one thing about money you wish you could tell your younger self.
I'm going to have to be cliche. Start earlier, start as soon as possible. Like every, oldie McFoldy, I'm like, if only I had, invested at Bitcoin at opening, if I had just bought a little Apple stock when Google went IPO. So like, it is, you'll spend the rest of your life eating yourself alive about that. But I just say to be constant and consistent and start as young as possible.
What's the best investment in yourself you've made so far?
So I don't buy individual stocks. So I use an index fund, which is recommended in the Simple Path to Wealth. And I mapped out exactly how much, of course, because I'm me, I want to have in 25 years. And I have different accounts dedicated to each goal. So for example, I want the business to fund $100,000 by the time I'm age 40. I'm cheating. I'm like 40 in 11 months because I might need till 41. So I have a account for that. I have 2 retirement accounts. I have 2 pensions. I just got money all over the place for individual goals. My best investment advice would be the investments I've made in myself, up to and including this business. So I took my own money and I funded the start of this business. It's starting to make a profit now, but I'm still technically funding. I'm operating as my own bank. Some of it was haphazard because I went to the bank. I was like, hey, I got a great idea. They were like, come back when you got money. So I was like, I still got that stubbornness in me. I was like, I'll teach you guys, you're going to be asking me for money. And so I went off and funded my own business. But, as far as college education, the certifications I got, the 400% increase in salary, those are all things within your control. It doesn't have to be 4%, 400%. You don't have to use me as a metric, but an investment in yourself, even as simple as reading these books that we're talking about, mental investments in yourself. I would actually say those have been they're invaluable but yet the most valuable.
Great point. What do you want your legacy to be?
In my mind, I use the metaphor of, put your oxygen mask on first, like they do at the airport, recommended anyway. And that's kind of what I see my financial independence journey as. I would like to get to a point, and I've got a number in mind. I'm not going to share it because I don't want people asking for money. But I do have a number in mind that I'm striving towards that I would see as my financial independence. And then once I reach that, I feel like that lifts me and what by that time will be my wife to financial independence. And then I would like to go towards lifting my mother and father to financial independence because of all their things to do. And my fantasy, which I start to go into now. So I think I'll reach financial independence. I've got a pretty set calculated plan behind it. But I would like to one day pay off and pay for my parents' home, just like as a thank you for everything you've done. And then if I got the money, like, there's a car that my dad's had his eye on. It's like a 67 Mustang or something like that. I would just like to do for them because they've done so much for me. And I'm going in order on purpose. And then just kind of work in circles out from that. And then how can I help the greater family? How can I help the friends? These people that have been in my life supporting me when I was $30,000 debt, when I was making $5.15 an hour. And then I thought I was balling when I was making $9 an hour. Just these people, how can I put this mask of security and financial independence on them? But anybody at home, doing the math, frankly, there's no way that's less than multi-millions. So a lot of things need to work out and go right. But like my father said, what's plan B? Like the time's going to pass anyway. I got 25, 30, 50 years to figure it out. Why not strive for greatness? Why not make the sky the floor instead of the sky the ceiling?
Well, Marcus, thank you so much for sharing your story. Can you please tell our dreamers where they can find you?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm most active on Instagram, universally branded at The Marcus Garrett, but you can find everything you need at themarcusgarrett.com. I'm giving away a special right now. It's themarcusgarrett.com/webinar. You can join a free community newsletter. As a thank you, I'll send you a free download. You'll get a replay. And one of my most popular articles is how much debt can you afford on a $30,000, $50,000, or $100,000 salary. I'll send you those action items for free.
All right. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. That was Marcus Garrett. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. On the podcast next week, we have Lauren Miller. We'll be talking generational wealth, succession planning, and legacy building in the Black community.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Dreamers Podcast. You can find today's show notes and all of the links mentioned during the episode at dreamoflegacy.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, here's what you can do to support me and help more dreamers discover the podcast. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. I read every single review and I'll select one review to read on the podcast every month. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Share the podcast with your family, friends, and coworkers. And if you really enjoyed today's episode, tag me on Instagram at thedreamers.podcast and let me know what you liked about it. All right, dreamers, that's it for today. I will see you back here next week for another episode of the Dreamers Podcast.
Okay, dreamers, time to build this legacy.
This podcast is for general information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax, legal, financial planning, insurance, accounting, investment, or any other kind of professional advice or services. Please consult with an appropriate tax, financial, or legal professional to receive appropriate advice based on your situation.
Sunday, Skincare Day, is one of the ways I keep my sanity in these crazy times. Jimino is an all-natural, Black-owned skincare brand carefully handcrafted by parents who could not find the proper care solutions to address their family skin problems. All Jimino products are made of organic and high-quality ingredients, meticulously chosen to give your skin the smooth results and the glow it deserves.